Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 268 of Kouryer podcast. Our today's guest is Mr. Daniel McGarry. He's a concept artist at Framestore Studio and also a co-founder of Concept 101 event and podcast from London, United Kingdom, which we will talk about it in this podcast as well. And in the for contact section of the captions, you can find the links to his Instagram and art station as well to see more of his works and get in touch with him for all that stuff. And with this quick introduction out of the way, how are we doing today?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing pretty well, man. Very well. Yeah.
Awesome.
Surviving through the strikes that still seem to be ravaging the film industry, but otherwise okay. Yeah.
The writer's strike, you mean?
Well, the writers' strikes are still having like massive ramifications in the film industry, unfortunately. So the writers and the actors' strikes obviously both lasted a very long time, like pretty similar to the 2008 strikes. And that's just had a pretty like harsh kind of like, I guess, like ripple effect across the rest of the industry. And now we have the IATSE strikes coming up as well, potentially on the horizon, which is, I think I'm correct in saying the trade unions, essentially. So those are people who work on set, and they are due for a strike because they apparently weren't very happy with their contract 3 years ago. So lots of fun stuff to look forward to. Yeah.
But I mean, hopefully in the end, they all get to like a happy end with all the strikes. I mean,
absolutely, yeah. Especially since VFX doesn't actually have a union to speak of. It's a little bit rough sometimes because you're kind of just like sitting through and waiting for these other strikes to end. But yeah, hopefully everybody just gets like a happy resolution and production continues and gets back to normal.
Oh yeah, like, it's like I've seen a quote on Twitter which said it pretty clearly that, these people who are on the top, they make millions by giving peanuts to the people who are working on the projects.
Yeah, I think that's most industries, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's kind of messed up. I hope things get better, honestly. Like with everything, like, with every news, every year, like, every week you get some new dystopian news in the world of entertainment. And, I hope people, like, there should be a jolt of hope for people in the industry, I hope
totally.
It gets to like a happy resolution. And do you want to add something to that?
I mean, I think we're like hopefully slowly coming out of it. Obviously, there's just been like a really unfortunate year in many ways across entertainment, with regards to like the games layoffs as well, which has really sucked. But I hope we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Obviously, nobody can really predict the future, and a lot of the economic forecasts are a little bit depressing. But I'm, fingers crossed. I'm hopeful. Just looking forward to like working on cool projects and seeing what's coming down the line, essentially.
All right, awesome. And all right, so let's start off with like the first signature question of the podcast, which is, give us a little introduction on how we got into the world of visual arts and design. Basically, tell us your origin story of what led you basically to become an artist.
Yeah. Well, I was bitten by a radioactive art spider. And that really gave me a big boost as a child. So I'm quite lucky insofar as my family is quite art oriented. Both my parents are actually architects, which gave me a really nice kind of like, I suppose, like grounding in the world of art growing up. Being aware of like different things, and I went to a lot of art galleries and did things like life drawing, which was awesome. And then I really started to get interested in concept art, I think, early on by looking at stuff like Feng Zhu's Design School on YouTube, which is, like still a really incredible resource that I recommend people check out. Also looking at, stuff by like Ahmed El-Dori and Psychra and Cynics and all these like, big artists who are still around today. And that interest kind of just like continued and continued, probably from about when I was like 16. I ended up going to Arts University in London, where I studied graphic design, actually, which was a choice considering that I knew I wanted to do concept art. I spent pretty much a lot of my time at university really just like terrorizing my teachers and trying to convince them that concept art actually did count as graphic design homework, just over and over again. It was fine. By the time I left, actually, I believe they actually added it into the curriculum, which was nice to see, because I think they just were like, oh God, if we get another student like him, we should just have it prepared already. but yeah, that was great. It wasn't actually like a pure graphic design course, so I actually did a lot of other stuff. I was able to practice like illustration techniques. I did a lot of filming and animation, which was, is incredibly informative to what I do now. Actually understanding how a camera works can be pretty helpful when you're making concept art. And then, around the time where I was like starting to finish up my degree, I was like taking loads of CGMA classes, like really just trying to get as much actual concept art education as I could, because, I was studying graphic design, which had nothing to do with that. There wasn't even somebody on my course who taught how to draw, like even just like basic fundamental stuff. So it was very like self-guided work. So to try and help myself, I was like getting CGMA courses and Learn Squared and all that good stuff. And as I just kind of progressed, I started to get a little bit freelance, which was great. That was kind of my introduction to the professional world in a way. I worked on a bunch of music videos for some fairly big artists, who I think I've said who they are online, but then I always get cautious because technically I'm not meant to, because of the NDA that I have with them. I also worked on like advertising and theme parks, and probably the best thing that I worked on was I got to do like a Spotify music video, which was super exciting, which had like Blackpink and Bad Bunny and Billie Eilish in it, which was great. It's just like fun, it was like something that I could go and tell people about at parties, which is nice. And then just before I graduated, I started applying for jobs, and I got super lucky, and I managed to get a placement as a junior concept artist at Industrial Light and Magic in London, which was, like a pretty crazy way to start off my career. Immediately just jumping onto some super cool kind of gigs. So yeah, that's pretty much how I got into the industry.
All right, awesome. And well, that was quite an interesting story. But something else I'm kind of like curious, which is on the same vein as the question that I just asked, is why out of everything that's been out there, what led you to decide to become a concept artist out of everything else? And why a specific, and it's kind of funny, how you mentioned that in your graphic design, which of course you mentioned it's not actually a graphic design course. It's like a multidisciplinary graphic course, something like that. But why out of all of this, why concept art? Why not 3D? Why not like animation? Like what led you to this path? You know what I mean?
I think like a lot of concept artists, like if we look at like the movies I really like and stuff like that, it's, it's Star Wars and those kind of films. And I remember as a kid, I used to collect a lot of kind of like those world encyclopedias, where you'd get like the world of like, well, now it would be like the world of Avatar, and they would have like a, named collections of like every single flower that was on the whole planet and all this other, rubbish essentially, which isn't in the film, but they just invent it. And, I just really love that stuff. And I think that kind of like love of world building is really what pushed me into doing concept art. Because I think not out of all of them, but compared to a lot of the artistic kind of like disciplines that are out there, especially in entertainment design, concept art really gives you a lot of kind of agency to really like push projects in directions that you want to see them go, right? Even if you have like an incredibly strict director who's telling you like, I want you to design like a purple square or something, every single artist is going to approach designing that purple square in a slightly different way. So you always still have like a little bit of your originality, or at least you try to have a little bit of your originality in each thing you do. So yeah, I think it was just that thing of wanting to maybe like maybe it's a little bit egotistical in a way, but like maybe having some control over what I was doing, rather than, I guess, like doing pure technical skills and like making stuff happen. I quite enjoy the fact that like even in professional concept art, you still get a lot of the artistic kind of like process in it. And that's just great. Yeah, I think it just gives you a lot more freedom. I think the only other thing that I ever really considered like properly doing was maybe like illustration, because it has the other kind of like fun benefits that concept art has of you creating, like really nice imagery, and also getting to choose what you're doing. And then besides that, maybe like actually filming. Although I didn't have the greatest experiences doing filming at university, I kind of sucked at it. I found cameras really difficult to use, honestly. And whatever I was making or shooting something, it was always way better when we had a DP with us, who could actually, like control the whole situation. But I do find that aspect of it really enjoyable. And, whilst I've been in the film industry, like some of the most fun memories I have are of the times where I've got to go and visit set and, actually see that kind of like crazy, chaotic process actually happening in front of me. it makes you feel like you're in one of those like behind the scenes documentaries, which is just quite cool. You're just like, oh yeah, look at that happening over there, and you get to meet loads of people, and yeah, it's just great, especially when if you do get to visit set, they're actually building one of your sets there, and you get to see the actors doing stuff on it. It's just amazing. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, now that you mention it, actually, like, do you remember the games, like, especially from early 2000s, they usually had like an extras like option in the menu, and usually when you in the extras there was credits, there was like behind the scenes stuff, and also sometimes the art, basically the content of the artwork of the book of the game, in that section. And I remember like that's those stuff are really fascinating to me. Like for example, the Prince of Persia had that, I remember. Like when I finished the game and I went back to the extras and I saw all these cool artworks and concept arts. I didn't know they were concept arts. I had no idea what they were. I was 8, 9 years old. I was a kid. And I found them super fascinating. And I remember when I was really young and I was just watching like my brother playing Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
And I was like, ooh, in my head. And I just said it out loud. Wow, it would be cool. I want to make video games someday. But like imagine being in a country like Iran and say you want to become an artist, and especially something like video games, like that wouldn't even cross your mind at all,
Right. Yeah.
Like as an option, But everyone said, like, then my uncle passed out, like was walking by. I said, "You see all this? These are all." I think I accidentally just said "pass away," right? I mean, it was passing
by.
Yeah, passing by. No, you just got shocked for a second. I'm sorry. But basically, like because he's an engineer, he said, "Oh, if you want to learn video games, you have to be super good at math. These are all math, And I was so disappointed. I was like, "Oh, then I guess this is not for me." And later on, a couple of years later, when I was applying for college, I remember university, I just searched some concept, like some sci-fi thing. I don't remember what it was. But I got on Google and I saw a picture, an illustration that I really liked. And it was an illustration from DeviantArt. And it was a concept artist's work. And I was like, whoa, people do this stuff? Is this a thing? And actually, the first thing that got me into, like, becoming a digital artist was concept art,
Yeah.
And I did
because
it for
everybody has that moment of realization, right? Where you find out about something for the first time.
Yeah, like, it's a thing? Like, I was like that. And basically what happened later, like, to summarize it as much as I can, I started, practicing the fundamentals, everything. Then at some point I came up on, like, I came across Blender and I tried it and I loved it. I love 3D. I was like, this clicks much better than 2D for me,
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna be honest, I'm not talented at 2D at all. Like, I mean, of course, everyone can, practice something and become good at it, obviously. But I'm much more talented in 3D than in 2D. Like, my brain thinks much better, imagines much better in 3D. I don't know if that makes sense. Do you kind of feel like that as well sometimes?
Yeah, I mean, one of the nice things about doing concept art is that you actually usually have to blend 2D and 3D quite a lot. I mean, I spend quite a lot of time doing 3D artwork, and I think the nice thing, like you said, is like, I don't know if it clicks more for me necessarily than 2D work, but it clicks in a different way, and like you get a different kind of enjoyment out of it, right? When I'm designing like a spaceship or something, for example, the fun for me in doing it in 2D is like the aesthetics of it, because I just like the look of that kind of work when it's actually hand drawn. But also the fact that you can like actually experiment and iterate very easily. If you want to add in a giant shark fin on the back of your spaceship, it's just 2 lines and you're done, right? So it's just way less effort. It's a lot lower bar for entry almost than 3D. The joy for 3D, when you're using that, is that you actually get to really go in depth into the design, like way more than you really kind of ever could, unless maybe you're like Ron Cobb or somebody who's the guy who designed the Nostromo for Alien, who's like did some insanely detailed drawings, but a very exceptional kind of like anomalous work essentially. So yeah, it means that you can just go like way more in detail, and then once you've done all that detail passes and you've really figured out the shape and everything, you get that fun bit of like spinning the model around and be like, oh yeah, so real, so cool. Which I think is always super nice.
Yeah, and on the same topic, I want to ask you something else. How does your design process usually go anytime you want to start working on a new piece or a project? Basically, what does the structure of your pipeline usually look like?
So So it's interesting. I deal with a lot of students and I do a lot of mentoring, which is great. I've also been teaching at a concept art school lately, which I'm not sure if I can say who that is yet, but I will presumably at some point be able to say that I worked there and for quite a considerable amount of time, which has been really wonderful. But the process that I teach my students is very pared down. It's quite simple, which is we start off with like a kind of large variety of, like iterative sketches. So again, let's say we're doing a spaceship. We're going to do maybe 15 to start off with, right? And try to get a maximum variety of shape design, totally different, almost like subjects to each ship and like different theories behind each one. Then we're going to start narrowing it down. Maybe we're going to do kind of like 6 or 7, like much tighter designs where we're really starting to nail down the look. And then we'll move into potentially like a final design where we're going to start building that up in 3D and really figuring out what's going on, right? So that's how I teach people to do it. And the reason I teach people to do it like that is because it's very predictable and repeatable. So especially if you're a student trying to get into the industry, it's kind of a good methodology to use, and it's repeatable methodology because what you're doing is you're showing off the same skills that will be required in like 99% of concept art jobs. And you're doing it in such a way that is easy for an art director who might be wanting to hire you to actually understand. One of the problems that I've seen with like some students is that in their processes, they can be a little bit too messy sometimes, especially when they're trying to get into the industry. So they're not aware of things, like if you're doing sketches, right, that they have to look good enough that, especially if you're in film, where we deal a lot with clients one-on-one, they have to be good enough that you can actually show them to the client. They can't just be like messy little sketches that are just for you, right? So you really have to kind of like just understand, I guess, the professional process so you can mimic in your own work. And that's definitely what I did when I was getting into the industry. Now that I've been in the industry for a little bit of time, which again, like I'm very happy and like feel very lucky to be in it, I definitely experiment a lot more like in my own work to just keep it fun and fresh for me. I have like one project with Godzilla in where I did like some crazy amount of like drawings of the actual Godzilla monster. Just like iterate. And then some of the iterations I was doing line art and I was painting over some of them and I was going back to line art and I was doing 3D. And it was a real kind of like, I guess, like mess of stuff. Similarly, like I have some other projects where I just do all of the iteration, but then I never show it, because it doesn't matter because again, like I'm in the industry. So I'm kind of like luckily a bit past the point of having to prove myself like that in a way. And then I have other ones, like I have a LAPD project that came out recently of like a piece of architecture where I just did like a bunch of ink drawings, which were like super fun. So what I do is like I'll print out like a very, very, very faint 3D block out, just like a few cubes and stuff on some pieces of paper. And then I'll get my inks out and I will just like actually ink up the design over the top of them, which means that because they're printed out, I can do like 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 versions of something from exactly the same angle, just in traditional, which is like amazing and really, really fun. So yeah, like I think it's there's like that predictable methodology, which is useful if you're trying to get in. And then once you're in, I think it really benefits you to actually just try out a lot of different stuff, especially because a lot of different clientele might want different approaches as well. So when, if somebody reaches out to me, for example, for freelance, they usually will also say like, oh, we're reaching out to you because of like this image, and we want you to do something different. And having that big variety of stuff means that there's a greater amount of things that they can essentially come to you and say like, hey, we want you to do this kind of thing, right? So it just brings in more clientele essentially overall, which is obviously desirable for anybody. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's like specifically one piece of your artwork that I really like, which is I would say it's my favorite one. Because it falls down in the niche of the stuff that I like, and it's the Diamond the Sky post on ArtStation. I don't know if you know which one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But like I just want to ask you about the first piece, which is like a kind of like a red, like it feels like a part of a spaceship that's been modified by the settlers of that planet to use it for their own. Is that right, or what's the story behind it? Like tell me a little bit about the story.
So the story behind that project was I really felt like last year, like I spent a lot of time experimenting, but not necessarily in a productive way. So I was experimenting a lot with like how much 3D I might want to use in my process. There's like some of the images are like way more painterly than stuff that I had ever done before in years previous. And so I was experimenting a lot. I was pushing myself quite a lot in those ways. And then when it got to kind of 2024, which I think is when I posted that one, so this year, it was either like just at the end of last year or just at the start of this year, I really felt by that time like I was maybe focusing on the wrong things. I think your priorities change throughout your career, right? So sometimes you want to focus on like techniques, and other times you want to focus on the ideas. And at this point, I really just want to focus on the ideas. The other thing was I was getting a little bit pressured by like the Instagram algorithm, I feel, to just like keep posting stuff. And I was trying to make work pretty regularly. So I kind of decided at that point where I was just like, I'm so sick of this. Like, I just want to make something that actually makes me happy. So instead of like pressuring myself to make an image and then post it and do any of this, I just took out my iPad. I got a bunch of like design ideas out on Pinterest, so like getting loads of like different abstract references. I just started to sketch. And I actually have a collection of maybe like, I want to say like maybe 60 different sketches that I did, which are all in full color. They're very messy, but I think there's something visually appealing about them. I don't think I posted them anywhere. But I just started sketching and trying to come up with these weird ideas and like weird shapes. And then what I did was I put them all every day once I was done with my sketches. So let's say I did like 4 or 5 sketches a day just in the evening for fun. I put them on a Kouryer file, and then what I started doing was actually organizing them into little groupings. So for example, the pink building that you're talking about with like the 3 kind of animals outside and the guy, those are all like different individual sketches. So the building was a sketch that I did, the animal was a sketch that I did, and the character was also a sketch that I did. And so once I grouped them all up together and I put them all on the page, like on the same kind of like formatting, I was like, oh, this actually looks quite cool. And maybe there's a narrative and like interplay between these elements that will look quite nice. And that's what then sparked making that image. And yeah, I just was really trying to push myself to make something that I don't want to say, I mean, I'd like to think it's fairly unique in the grand scheme of what you see on ArtStation, but more so something that just made me happy and felt like a genuine expression of like the art that I enjoy. I think a lot of artists, like, it's very easy for us to feel pressured to create stuff that we think other people will like. And I got to be honest, I think I found it's not been a super long career, but over the career that I have had, that all of the stuff that, or a lot of the stuff that gets the most positive reception is the stuff that I like the most. Because over time, as you accumulate more followers, I've got, my insane following of 6,000 whole people. It's like totally, I'm pretty much a celebrity, But as you accumulate more people, you're accumulating people who actually like what you like usually. Like, that's the hope, right? You don't just want like 6,000 random people. You want 6,000 people who actually give a shit about what you're making. And so, yeah, as that's just continued, I found like the more I try to express what I actually enjoy about art and the genres that I like and all this other stuff, the better things have been for me as well in like terms of social media. So I'm not trying to like push myself really anymore to put stuff out. There's probably still a little bit of pressure there. But for example, like, I'm working on a project right now. I just finished another project recently, which was like some space pirate guys, which was really fun. I did all my keyframes in like comic book style, which was great as well. And now I'm working on a new kind of like world building project, which was an idea I had a long time ago. And now I have like the technical skills to actually kind of hit it. And we'll just see kind of where it goes. It might end up being like something I spend a year on, or it might be something I spend a month on. But I just want to have fun with it, essentially. Yeah.
All right. Awesome. That's actually such a healthy mindset, honestly.
I think it's easy to have a healthy mindset when things are going fairly good, right? I think I'm pretty lucky insofar as like career wise. I feel like I've been like very, very, very lucky with how things have gone for me. Not that I didn't also work hard for some of the stuff that I have career wise, but you can't deny in life, that things go well for you sometimes, and I think it's important to acknowledge that stuff as well. So yeah, it's like I'm very luckily at a point where, like, I feel like a lot of the artists I care about follow me on Instagram, which are the people who I always wanted to follow me, So, as like now it's just like kind of random people accumulating, which is also great. It's because it's more people. So I don't feel pressured to do it like that. And also professionally, one of the big things for a lot of people when they're creating work is this kind of like fear that they don't have enough stuff in their portfolio. Yeah, because the more stuff you have, the more jobs you'll hopefully also receive. And I mean, this isn't really luck necessarily, but I just have a very big portfolio because I've been working on it for a very long time, and I put a lot of time into it, which is great because now it means I can take it a little bit easier because I have, an example of like the majority of skills that I have under my belt. And hopefully as well, the other thing that will help like boost all of that is that maybe some films will come out. Like, for example, in my portfolio now, I have a really good chunk of the stuff that I did on the Creator, which was like amazing to work on. And that has also boosted my portfolio. So now I'm hoping, like some of the next few films, I've got like one film specifically that's coming out this year, which I'm really looking forward to, hopefully, fingers crossed, sharing some stuff from that because it will also fill in some gaps in my portfolio and look nice. But yeah, I think once you get into that professional flow and you have projects that are coming out and there's other kind of like means of like, I guess like stuff that represents you maybe publicly, it's less of a stress. Obviously, if you don't have enough work in your portfolio, you probably should try to get on top of that, I would say. I think it's more beneficial for you long term because like, again, I think some people tend to just maybe like drag things out too long. For me personally, I'd rather spend like a few months like crying in my bed rather than spending like 5 years feeling like generally sad, if that makes sense. So I'd rather just work really, really hard for 3 months and get it done. Which also, of course, I'm lucky enough to have the ability to do that too in terms of like my financial situation and all this other stuff. So yeah, no, it's a healthy mindset, but it's a healthy mindset that's led by the fact that, I've got lucky, I guess. So I have the luxury of being able to have a healthy mindset. Yeah.
Damn. Like, that's another healthy mindset as well, being grateful for what you have. Dude, congratulations. You got life figured out.
I'm so far from having life figured out.
I know we all are works in progress, but I really get my points. Like, I want to say something. Like, yeah, basically what I was just thinking about today was that we, with intentionally or unintentionally, we choose our sufferings. Like suffering, like you can either suffer through practice and force yourself to, to do the things that you don't feel like to, or you suffer the consequences of not doing those.
Yeah.
Life is death. Yeah. Life is just suffering. You just have to do which one you want.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think just not to play devil's advocate or anything to what you're saying there, but I think it's also important to acknowledge that like some people also have like just totally unintentional suffering that is just not their fault that they have to deal with. I think, it's important to acknowledge, like, if you have, like I said, like with myself, like I've had the luxury of being able to work hard for 3 months at a time to get stuff done, which is a luxury that not everybody has. Like, I don't have a lot of outside things at this stage of my life that I have to deal with, right? I don't have kids running around. I don't have like people who rely on me financially. I live in like in a city which like provides a lot of stuff for me, even though London's super expensive and awful in its own ways, but it's still a great place to live, right? So yeah, I think it's just good to, like you have to manage it depending on what's actually going on in those outside factors. Like, again, the outside factors that I have in my life are very manageable. So if you have more difficult outside factors to deal with, then it's totally understandable why it might take that longer time period to actually build up, getting past that suffering, is that, like you said,
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of like artists that you mentioned, who are some of your favorite artists and designers that have inspired you the most?
Ooh, that's a good question. I just so many people. James Klein is like super amazing. I got to work with him, and he was a production designer, and his skill level is just like so unreal. Just like totally incredible artist. A lot of the people I work with at work are like incredibly inspiring on a daily basis, like getting to see what they create. Jamie Jones, Craig Mullins, John Park. A lot of these people are just like insanely good. I think a lot of the people I really look up to are like very good painters a lot of the time, which is interesting because a lot of the work that I enjoy doing is actually design work. I think Matthew Alsop is one of my favorite artists. I think he runs like a really interesting blend of skills where he does like these insanely good storyboard pieces on stuff like Godzilla vs. Kong. But then he can also do incredibly tight, but still like painterly pieces of work on shows like Obi-Wan Kenobi. And then he can also do like crazy vehicle designs and, you know, like that kind of work on stuff like Star Wars. I mean, it's just like his portfolio is like where I hope my portfolio is one day, essentially. And also the projects that, you know, people like that get to work on are just crazy. I mean, I've been super lucky with the projects that I've done as well. But, you know, you always kind of hope, you're like, oh, maybe I'll get Star Wars next year. Maybe I'll get this next year. You know, always the next like super big thing. Yeah.
All right. And this next question is kind of interesting to me because I was browsing your portfolio, like, you know, before we got on the call, and I was just, you know, fascinated with something. The majority of the niche of your artworks are usually in the realms of sci-fi, right? But
yeah,
but sometimes I see some like these stylized, like, you know, kind of like medieval setting stuff as well, like fantasy settings, like, you know. Like, it's kind of just interesting to me that you have both of them on the same portfolio. Like, is that because a lot of people, especially juniors, hear all the time that, no, you should just be niche in one area if you want to get a job or something, or, you know, how does that work?
Well, so I mean, people saying that you should be niche is something that I heard a lot as well when I was like coming up as a student. I have to say that again, this is within my personal professional experience, right? I'm not speaking for everybody in the world here, but I would say being a generalist, if you can pull it off, is like incredibly beneficial, especially essentially if you want to work in film. So there are definitely, so like just from the film context, there are 100% specialist artists in the movie industry. But generally speaking, if you join the film industry, especially if you're working on a vendor or maybe if you're working in an art department on an actual film, you're probably not going to be a specialist. The range of stuff that you have to work on, especially if you're working for a vendor like ILM or Framestore, is crazy. Like literally 1 week you might be working on like a historical epic, you know, where it's like knights smashing the shit out of each other and dragons. And then the next week you're working on like a modern military film. And then the week after that, you're working on like a Kafka-esque Dali space opera set 20,000 years in the future. So with regards to like my portfolio, it's really just a reflection of that. Something I was aware of when I was a student because I was lucky enough to meet some people in the film industry who gave me some very good advice. But yeah, it's just like, in a way, I think the advice for students to be specialized really mainly applies to games. And there is also some logic to it, right? But I think the logic behind it is that you're only going to be able to get so good at so many things, which I don't, in my personal experience, I don't think is correct. I'm not the greatest sci-fi artist in the world. I'm also not the greatest medieval fantasy artist in the world. But to a lot of clients, I'm good enough to get the job done. And I think that's kind of where the benefits come in, is like you can just jump between a massive range of different things. At the end of the day, I think it just comes down to like your core skills, essentially. If somebody says to me, I can't do fantasy design, my immediate question is like, why? You're still using the same design principles. Like, let's say you're designing like a car versus a cart and buggy for a film or something, right? You're still going to have to use like principles like 70-30, big, medium, small. You'll still have to understand detail distribution, all this other stuff. The only difference is the visual references that you get and collect, right? So it's not that much work, especially if you're being art directed on it, I think, to move between lots of different genres and subject matters. The example that I use with like a lot of my students is sometimes to explain this, I'll draw like a little picture of a guy on a hill with a sword. And first I'll draw some little horns on top of his helmet. I'm like, look, it's a Viking. And then I'll erase the horns and I'll draw like a little kind of like sci-fi visor, like a Mandalorian has on it. And I'll go, look, it's sci-fi. And I mean, in a way, that is fundamentally kind of how it works, right? You're still using the same skills no matter what you're drawing. It's just the set dressing and the overall look a lot of the time that changes. So especially, considering that a lot of my work, especially because I work in film again, is like keyframe based, it doesn't make that much of a difference to me, like what I'm doing. I do definitely prefer sci-fi work, don't get me wrong. But I would feel, totally fine working on a medieval movie as well. especially living in England, where like you grow up seeing loads of medieval stuff around you all the time, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. And well, there's like, the next thing I want to actually mention is that let's actually go to some of the interesting things I want to talk about with you, which is like let's get to the meat and potato of the situation.
Okay.
The Concept 101 podcast and like the annual festival. Tell us about that. What is the origin story of it? By the way, for anyone who's listening or watching, the links to the YouTube channel of Concept 101 podcast and the Instagram page are all in the captions. You can find it. So yeah, go ahead.
Cool. Well, the event and the podcast are kind of like one and the same thing. So the event came first, really, which was me and my friends, Stefan Valasek and Jules Darula. If he listens to this, he'll say I pronounced his name wrong, but that's close enough. We were all kind of like getting together pretty regularly towards the end of COVID here in the UK. We all had just like recently started our careers, which was amazing. And, we were just trying to like build up a sense of community just within London. And there used to be, and they're kind of coming back a little bit now, but there used to be loads and loads of concept art events here in the UK. So there was one called Industry Workshops, which I think was like considered one of the best ones in Europe. I went to just like one of them before they shut down, which was a real shame. I wish I could have gone to more. But Jules used to go like every year, I think, since he was like 15 years old or something crazy. So he had always been going to them. So it was a big part of his life. And I had kind of gone to this event called Vertex, which has just come back this year, actually. I think the event is in April, for anybody who wants to go to that. But they had just come back as well. And so there was this like, because of COVID, right, none of these events were on anymore. And I think a lot of them were still reeling from the impact that COVID had on them. And so there was essentially this massive gap in the market for an event to happen. Now, we were just like wanting to do something for the love of the game, essentially, where we were just like, let's just try and see if we can do this. We know a lot of people. One of the like inciting things that happened was a few like months before we ever spoke about this, we had just had a bunch of friends hang out together in London because, again, like COVID had just ended, so everybody wanted to see each other. And we had like, I want to say like 30 people come, which was just our friends from the industry. And so we were all talking about it and we were like, if we can get 30 people together and that's just our friends, we could probably get 100 people together pretty easily. If we get 100 people together, maybe we can get like 400, 500 people. And so it kind of snowballed. And one of the big things that really helped us do it initially was that Shark Mob, where Stefan works, gave us this like massive kind of like boost of initial funding to really help the event happen. And then we started reaching out to more people to really get it going. So yeah, and for the people who don't know, who've never heard of Concept 101 before, it's totally free as well. So all of the costs are covered on the event organizer's ends. So essentially what happens is we try and collect as much money from companies around the UK and Europe as much money as possible. And that then all goes into creating the event. So like every single cent of the money that we're given goes into paying for venues, paying for like food and drinks for people, getting the speakers there, like all this other stuff, like all the costs that you can imagine come with running an event, which also they're really bloody expensive. Jesus. And essentially what happened was the first year we did it, we got a really great deal for a venue. We had, I want to say like 400 and something people. I think it was like just under 500 people turned up. We had this amazing lineup of speakers, all kind of like friends of ours as well, who were like, yeah, I don't know if this will work, but I guess I'll support it, which was nice of them. And probably the best moment of that was like the first hour where we were setting up. I had to go outside and chat with security to kind of see what was going on. And as I walked out the door, I could see the queue there. And I was like, first of all, I was like, whoa, thank God there's a queue. And then as I walked further and further out with the security, I could see just how long the queue was. And I mean, just on opening time, there were like a few hundred people and it was just crazy. I mean, it was really super exciting that more so, because it was the first time that we had done it and we had no idea if it was going to work or not. Even though everybody had got their tickets, there's still free tickets. So it's always a little bit uncertain whether people will actually turn up because they don't necessarily have that like financial incentive to do so. but yeah, it was just really great. And then last year we did it again, where I think we had around 800 attendees, which was awesome, and like just also super amazing speakers coming again. And then this year we're coming for the third year, so we're currently organizing it. I can't say anything about when or where it will be. But it's been an interesting challenge, especially given the kind of like climate of the industry too, with all of the layoffs and everything. But yeah, we're trying to make it happen, which will hopefully be cool. And then, like you said, the podcast, that just came as like a natural kind of like offshoot of the event. Yeah, we also, just to like try and strengthen like the bonds in London as well, we have like a bunch of drink and draws we do. As of the time of recording, I presume this will come out well after the fact, but like as of the time of recording this weekend coming, we've got like a kind of like drawing meetup where we go to like the museums here in London, and we'll go around and draw in groups and stuff, which is also great because the museums in London are generally free. So it's just really nice. And yeah, it's been like a really great experience doing Concept 101. It's just it feels very nice to help people. I think the highlight of it was we did a charity. The highlight for me, at least, was we did a charity fundraiser at Christmas this year, which did really well. We raised just under £4,000 for UNICEF, which was great. Obviously, that money going to like very kind of like well-meaning causes and stuff. And that was just wonderful because, again, like we had like loads of professional artists coming together to put together this like really amazing charity bundle where some of them were giving away 3D assets, some were giving away tutorials. And, you know, to get this like bundle of stuff, which was worth like, you know, maybe £300, you just had to give a tenner to, again, a charity. So it's like a very nice thing to get to organize. And yeah, you know, nice to do something positive with the kind of like community voice that we have here in the UK. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Like, I mean, what you said, like with the first year, at least 500 people showed up. Yeah. That just shows that people crave that stuff. People crave
totally.
Listen, especially because I think it was after like, you know, those rough stages of COVID and we were all locked inside. So we had that like, you know, fire and just, we want to see people again in real life and stuff like that. And I think that's really helped as well. But a lot of, yes, we're humans, we're social creatures, you know, and it's really nice to have like, you know, meetups and, you know, stuff like that. I hope all over the world this stuff becomes more common, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I think people just like, I mean, if you're listening and you're thinking like, man, I wish that was happening, just try and organize it. It's like, it's kind of easy, honestly. I think if you have like just like 2 or 3 friends who are interested in it, right? All you have to do is set up an Instagram page, bash together a crappy logo, and start putting out some things, being like, hey, this is like the, I don't know, wherever you live, like Lisbon, this is the Lisbon art meetup group, and we're going to go here and do this. And as long as you're not doing it alone, you know, like slowly over time, like things will accumulate. It's been really great, you know, especially as part of Concept 101, doing those smaller meetups, because I remember where I grew up in the UK, just always thinking like, oh my God, I wish there was somebody around me who understood like, you know, concept art and cared about the stuff that I care about and sci-fi design and all this other stuff. And even when I was in London, I kind of moved here and I went to graphic design university, and I thought, oh yeah, finally I'm at university, right? I'm with other artists. There's finally going to be these people around me who care about the same stuff I care about. And then when I turned up, everybody was like, so what's concept art? They're like, you want to be a director? And I was like, no, I want to design stuff for the director. And they'd be like, why? And, you know, they just didn't get it. And it was like years of explaining stuff. So I think it is like a genuinely really special thing to get to communicate about things you're passionate about with other people who are passionate about it. But yeah, I think a lot of people would find it shockingly easy to do. And you'll probably find there are more people around you who care about that stuff than you think. Even one of my friends, who I remember lives in like, he was living in like the middle of nowhere in Germany. And he started talking to a few people on Instagram about doing stuff. And he found out that like one of the top kind of like German concept artists lived like 25-minute walk down the road from him, you know? So you can always be surrounded by these people who are incredibly passionate about art. And you never know unless you like really kind of reach out and try it.
All right. Yeah, I'll keep that in mind. But I don't think that could happen for me right now in Istanbul because I'm leaving soon, hopefully. But yeah,
well, maybe when wherever you end up moving to, you can do one.
Yep, that's a good point. And like there's also another thing I wanted to talk to you about. All right, since a lot of your artworks are in fiction, science fiction, so I assume you also are a huge fan of like the genre, right?
Yeah, sure.
So here's is my problem with something that's been happening recently in all of the media, like especially like games, movies, doesn't matter. Like, first of all, this question is a two-part question.
Okay.
The first part is this: what are some of your biggest pet peeves with the writing of sci-fi material these days? Whether it be games, movies, like what are you sick of actually?
I'm probably going to give a very diplomatic answer to that. I think a lot of the kind of like maybe hatred is a little bit of a strong word, but like the things that annoy people about writing these days, whatever they may be. You hear a lot of commentary online, especially around the film community, of people saying like, "Oh, XYZ movie, the writing was terrible, this and that." I think one of the things that people kind of misunderstand, and I've even heard a lot of people like who supposedly are like meant to be kind of like film insiders misunderstand this too, is just that like the writers, right, on a project actually have way less control than I think a lot of people appreciate that they do. A lot of the kind of like questionable decisions that happen in a movie. So, for example, like I don't think it's controversial to say that Madam Web didn't do very well. Same with maybe Morbius, right? There's a lot of like slightly poor writing in those shows. But a lot of that just won't come down to the writers. A lot of that comes down to kind of studio interference and producers getting like very heavily involved in the writing process. Similar to how, for example, like in concept art, right? If you work on a show, maybe, if you like, I don't know, Game of Thrones or something, maybe looking through some of the artists who worked on that, you see a design and you go like, oh, why did they design it like that? Why would they ever do it like that? That makes no sense to me. Don't like this. But the thing to understand is, again, like, that's usually not up to them. It's usually the directors and the producers and all these other people that are guiding the overall look. It's actually very rare that kind of like a completely unedited opinion of a piece of work from a concept artist actually makes it through, right? You never get the first image in. And it's very much the same for script writing, right? They very rarely get the first kind of script draft through. So I kind of, I mean, in terms of things I don't like, I don't like incoherent scripts that don't make sense. I like things that have like personally speaking, like I like simple films. I either like very simple films or very complicated films. Like two of my favorite films are like, I love Parasite because I think it's like a beautiful blend of like meta narrative storytelling and like, on a second viewing, there's so many shot-to-shot things that are happening. It was just incredibly well done. It's one of those things where you could like actually write an essay on it. And then on the other hand, I love movies like Star Wars because they tell very, very simple stories and they know what they are and they're aware of what they are, right? They are just like simple, good bits of fun. They are oriented towards kids. They're meant to give those kids like a hopeful and like good message. They're not meant to be too dark or depressing. And you leave those kind of things like feeling uplifted. So yeah, I don't know if I could say like there's like, oh, I hate XYZ trope that happens, because generally speaking, I think it just depends on how it's done. I think like anything could work in a film if it's done well enough, pretty much.
That's actually a really good point. But one thing that I don't know, what I'm going to say is the second part of this issue. Like, what I really hate these days in media is whenever they run out of ideas, they just pull parallel universe version of like characters, like parallel universe something, parallel universe this, that, or just I hate that. Like,
I mean, yeah, again, it depends on the film though, right? I think Everything Everywhere All at Once is a really good usage of those things because it's not about the parallel universe, it's a family drama. And it's just written to be a family drama that uses those sci-fi motifs in a really like interesting way. So yeah, I mean, I agree. There's, it's like right now we're going through like the superhero phase of movies, right? And people think what they think about those. But during the 1950s and 60s, there was also the cowboy period where like every single film was a cowboy film and you had people like Clint Eastwood, rising to fame through stuff like that. So eventually, I mean, theoretically, right, we will have this kind of swing back probably into like smaller, more indie films. And it would kind of be interesting to see like how that happens, if it happens at all. Maybe it will just be superhero movies forever and ever now, but, is what it is.
Yeah, just like how in late 2000s and early 2010s there was a lot of zombies just everywhere. Not zombies just everywhere,
Yeah.
But as a kid I really liked them for some reason. I don't know, I was dumb.
I don't think there's anything dumb about. I mean, you don't have to like good film. I like Fast and Furious. I think Fast and Furious are really fun movies. Not the latest two, although I worked on number 10, so maybe I shouldn't be saying that. But was it 10 or 9? I don't know. I worked on one of them. But I like those films because they're just like dumb fun. Again, like they don't take themselves too seriously, right? It's just like you just sit down and you just like turn your brain off for an hour and you go like, yeah, Vin Diesel, woo, family.
Yeah, exactly.
Give me a Corona. That's a good time.
Yeah. All right. So, speaking of things you're working on or worked on, what are you working on right now? What was
the second part of the question?
The second part. Oh, sorry. I forgot. Jesus. The second part of the question was I was going to add. Oh my God. How did I forget that? Thanks so much, actually, for reminding me that. The second part was, I was going to mention the whole parallel universe thing, and I wanted to know your opinion. Like, in your opinion, how could we fix this? Like, because here's the thing: when writers usually run out of ideas for sequels, they usually these days, this every game, they play. Oh, look, that character that was dead now is back. How? Parallel universe version. We're at the end of the story. Oh, the good guys are going to reset the timeline. Mortal Kombat. We're going to reset the timeline and go to the parallel universe version.
I think
it just happens everywhere. So how would you fix, in your opinion, if you were in charge?
Well,
how would you go about this?
If I was in charge, it would be very simple. I would just tell people to make different movies, right? If that's how I felt. I think the thing to understand is that as with many, many, many things in life, films are decided on by how much money gets given to them, right? So you can vote with your wallet to an extent. I think the thing that a lot of people forget is that regardless of how much you complain about Marvel movies and all this stuff, right, which a lot of people do, they're like, I'm so sick of Marvel films, which, I'll leave my opinions on that just because it doesn't really matter. But if you are sick of them, then stop watching them. But a lot of people don't. A lot of people watch them. They pay for Disney Plus. They pay for Netflix. They pay for these services that are, making these shows. And then they go onto those services and they continue to watch those shows. So whilst I think there's that argument of you kind of just watch whatever's given to you if there's no other alternative, right? Like if you want to see a sci-fi film, a lot of those sci-fi films are going to be superhero films these days. And you don't really have much of a choice in that conversation. But if you really, really feel strongly about it, just don't go and watch those movies, because then if they perform badly, less of them will be made. I think that's the thing, right? It's just even with Marvel films recently, a lot of people have been complaining about a bit of a drop-off in quality. And while some of them, like maybe Ant-Man, have really underperformed, a lot of them are still making hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. So as long as they're still making money, they're still going to get made. So from a consumer point of view, that's how you fix it, is you just stop going and watching them and you vote with your wallet.
Exactly. But yeah, people just love to, just watch music, and even though they know it's going to be bad.
Yeah.
I understand that, to be honest. I understand to an extent part of that.
Yeah.
Because
I hate watching sometimes.
Yeah, because here's the thing. For example, let me give you an example. Late spring 2023, I was super excited for Starfield.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, all right, have you played that game, by the way?
I haven't. I'm most of the time when I play video games these days, I see a random Steam sale. I'm like, yeah, I'll get 3 games for $5. I'll go play whatever came out 25 years ago, which is pretty good. I recommend it.
I bought Planescape Torment and Baldur's Gate 1 the other day. It was on my wishlist and there was an offer, and I was like, wait, I want to play them. But I'll probably never play them in a long time, because those are the games you have to actually put a lot of hours into it to enjoy it. And I probably don't have a free time like that.
Yeah.
The amount of free time I get for video games is an hour and a half per day, which is still a lot. I mean, to be honest, I should listen to that. But yeah, I just play Match of League and that's it. And get on with my life.
You were playing Starfield.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I have a little bit of ADHD. I tend to fall off things. I had a lot of expectation for Starfield. I was really happy for it. I pre-ordered it. I was like, wow, I'm going to play they didn't work on Elder Scrolls 6 and they spent 8 years on this, and they had a budget of 400 million. The promotional stuff seemed really nice. And I would say this, it was a 10 out of, not even 10 out of 10. It was a 7 out of 10 game for a game that would be released in the year of 2006. That's the nicest way I could criticize it.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess just with a lot of games as well, they have such long and complicated development cycles, and I also think it's worth remembering that while we like to think about games often being like kind of the visions of the studios, a lot of the time they're also appealing to like investors. They're having to make vertical gameplay slices, then they have to make a horizontal gameplay slice, then they have to make a demo to send to the investors, and they're constantly having to get a lot of like increases of funding, all this other stuff. And like you said, like games are very expensive these days, and I think not better. I mean, like, I do not personally buy games that are broken because, again, like I said, I believe in kind of like voting with my wallet in terms of stuff like this. So, like, I never pre-order games. I think that's a big mistake personally because that's like incentivizing them not to finish it. So I don't pre-order stuff, and I always wait for the reviews before I buy something. And if it doesn't, if the reviews are negative, I won't get it. But I mean, games are incredibly complicated, and they get more and more and more complicated every year. Plus the graphical expectations, plus they have to run at 60 FPS, plus bunches of them have like random multiplayer. And obviously, a lot of that does come down to the choices that these studios make. But I think it's also worth remembering that like these are projects that like sometimes well over like 1,000 people work on. I mean, they are like massive. It's kind of like a miracle that these things ever happen. So there's something to appreciate in that as well with these games. But yeah, no, I understand the frustration. But again, like, yeah, the best game that I played recently, I played Dark Tide, which is now fixed, which was great because originally, again, I didn't buy it when it originally came out because the reviews weren't great. But I got it now and I'm having a really good time with it. I've got like 3 different classes at nearly max level. And the other stuff I got, which is again one I got on cheap, was I got the full Dishonored series, which was I got it for like £3. And those are some of the, like, if you love concept art, you have to play Dishonored because not only from a gameplay perspective is it incredibly interesting, but the artwork on those games is phenomenal. I really don't think there's any video games that have come out in the last like 15 years that like not come close, but really have such a unique look to them and feel, you can just really tell a lot of love was put into every single asset in those games, and they're just really, really beautiful to look at. Yeah, I highly recommend those. Especially if you like that's a great mix of like fantasy and steampunk and loads of different genres too. It's just really, really cool stuff.
All right, awesome. Like, yeah, another game I think that's in the same vein is BioShock.
Yeah,
That's like, has insane like an art like Dishonored.
yeah. I think
Yeah.
I think I've played most of them. I might have played all of them, but yeah, it's. I think BioShock's definitely kind of like almost a precursor visually to Dishonored. There's definitely some DNA of that in Dishonored. And although a lot of people didn't like it, I really did like the third and final BioShock quite a lot visually. That was great, and yeah, it's just really cool when you see games which have like really fun and original ideas in it. I guess that's also why a lot of people really love games by like Hideo Kojima, right? Because he just has like his vision, and he is one of those few kind of auteurs that it seems like nobody can disrupt, and he just gets to make whatever he makes. Yeah, really. I mean, that's the goal I think for most artists, right? Is to like put your vision out there and collaborate with people to make something special and new.
Yeah. And well, speaking of collaborations and projects and all that stuff, what are you working on right now that you can tell us about? What kinds of project is it? I mean, obviously, like from your facial expression, I understand there's a huge NDA involved, but
yeah, I mean, in terms of like professional work, I can't talk about any of it.
Yeah, let's go with personal. No worries.
I mean, in terms of personal work, I'm doing a new world building project, which is. I don't want to say it's in a similar vein to my other stuff. I'm trying to push it in a slightly different direction. But I'm just working through it. I'm at that stage of like sketching and experimenting and like throwing stuff together. I've got a few finished images from it, which I've been considering posting. But like I said earlier, I'm trying to hold it back until the whole project is done. So I'm not being like kind of pulled by my nose through the Instagram algorithm. Because like I'd rather just have it all done, and you get like a certain sense of completion at seeing it all done at once and posting it all as well, which is great. So yeah, that's about it. I mean, a lot of my time these days is taken up with teaching, which has become like a really big thing for me. I mean, it's like teaching is great for lots of reasons, but it's also just like super rewarding to see people improve, which is always really lovely. And yeah, that's about it. I don't know what else. Creatively speaking, sketching, painting, usual stuff.
So everything is arts related in your life right now. Nothing arts
A
related.
pretty high percentage of it. I still make time to see my friends and hang out and play board games and video games and, you know, do the things that you need to live. You can't, I mean, some people do seem to live and breathe and die art. I maybe like breathe a bit of art and then breathe a bit of normal air and then go back to the art. You know, I try to vary it up so I have some kind of like difference in my life. I also think personally, like, if you truly go like, yeah, I'm going to do like 12 hours a day of art, you're probably just not going to be that productive and you're just going to want to fall asleep after a while pretty fast. And then the other thing that's taking a lot of time for me right now is, I think this, again, I don't know how long it takes for these episodes to come out, but I've been very lucky to get the chance to do a talk at IMAG with my colleague, Jules Derula from Framestore, also the guy who I founded Concept 101 with. So we'll be doing a talk at IMAG, which is it's like the first major kind of like lecture I've ever been able to give. I've done some smaller ones here and there, but this will be in person with a stage and a bunch of people. So I'm just like obsessively practicing it over and over again. Maybe by the time this comes out, there'll be like a really embarrassing video of me falling over on the stage and like breaking my nose, but hopefully that doesn't happen and it goes well.
We all have the same fear.
Yeah.
Like everyone has anxiety about tripping on stage. That's weird to me.
I would feel okay with tripping because at least that would be kind of funny, but I feel more anxiety about like forgetting what I want to say. And then I forget like half the lines or something. And then, yeah, it's just all gibberish. That would be not great. That would not, yeah. But anyway, I'm trying very hard. So hopefully it'll be good.
Don't worry about it.
The presentation itself is great. And I think what we're talking about is great. We're kind of like guiding people through the portfolio process of getting into the film industry, which I think is like, you know, pretty essential information for lots of people. But yeah, the rest of it's just delivery. So hopefully that's good.
And well, we reached the final question and section of the podcast, which is called Time Capsule.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, by the title of it, it's kind of self-evident what it's going to be. But let me explain this way. Imagine you only had like a few minutes, a short amount of window of time to explain, summarize, and tell us the most valuable life lessons you've learned thus far as a human. Yeah, it's a big one. So if you want, you can take your time. That's fine. And like any the most important things, just the most valuable things and important things that you've learned thus far as a human being to another human being that might listen to this podcast at any point of time in the future.
Well, I'll just say this like because it's in the vein of like some of the other things we've spoken about today, but really just like understanding that nobody is self-made and that everybody, like whether somebody says like, oh, I did like a bajillion hours of this and a billion hours of that, you have to understand that like everybody gets help from somewhere if they've achieved a certain level of success. That doesn't mean that everybody gets the same amount of help, but generally speaking, if you've done like fairly well with things up to a certain point in your career, then you've probably been given help, whether it's like people giving you advice and critique, or somebody giving you like the financial freedom to spend time studying, or maybe you meet the right people, or you get the right information in the correct order, or whatever it is, right? And I think it's very, very important to acknowledge like these good things that essentially happen to us and to not get too egotistical about where you are or why you're there, essentially. I owe like a massive chunk of my career to some very like amazing people, like my friend Rhys Griffiths and Kevin Fleeman, who both like mentored me for years. I've spoken about them like so many times on different things, but I mean, it's worth repeating. Like those guys, plus all of the other, like all of my friends who gave me feedback, all the people who supported me, like that's the reason why I am where I am. And without those people, without acknowledging that, I would be like totally nowhere. So, if you can acknowledge these things in your life and you can find kind of like the positives and do this kind of stuff, then the next step is just to try and do the same thing for other people. So, if you're an artist who is busy, if you get a bunch of emails from somebody asking for feedback, just try and respond to a few of them at least. And if you're a student and you're on the verge of becoming super successful, then remember why you became successful and try to help other people achieve the same thing, right? We don't want to be like crabs in the bucket pulling each other down. We want to help kind of push each other up. And I think that has been like a very important thing for me career-wise. And obviously that ties into Concept 101, right? And the meetups and having the podcast, which is educational, and doing like the charity fundraisers. It really does that kind of like principle of like, I guess, being grateful for what I have and acknowledging why I have it really informs a lot of stuff for me. So that's my little bit of life advice. A bit saccharine, but nonetheless, hopefully useful to somebody.
That's awesome. Like that's solid advice, honestly. And these are just some actual food for thought for people to think about. Like think about, why, like for example, the position you're in right now in life. What helped you? Who helped you? Try to have empathy for the same people who were in the same bad situations you were in. Like these are really important. Like, I mean, of course, like if you're in a bad mental state and you can't really help others, that's fine. Help yourself first.
It's totally down to like every individual's like situation. 100%. You can't expect, again, like I was saying earlier, right? You can't expect everybody to work for 3 months straight because some people aren't in positions to work 3 months straight. Even though like I've been like super lucky with a lot of things in my life, there were points where like, I mean, I worked it was so bad. I was so awful. I had a job for a while, like a normal job. And I worked as a bartender at a bar in between all of my like holiday breaks while I was at university to get a little bit of money. And like, that wasn't great. I was working from like 4 in the afternoon till 4 in the morning, quite a lot of nights, and messed up my sleep schedule. But again, because of these other things, I was able to still actually wake up in the morning, do my concept art, and then go back to the bar for another like round of torture. But again, like if that's like how you actually have to make your living, and you're doing that year after year, of course that's going to make it more difficult for you to spend 3 months working on concept art. And if you don't have a job at all and you can't financially support yourself, of course that's going to make it even more difficult. So yeah, it's all to everybody's different position. And, I guess the hope is, that all of us get those opportunities to really, best express ourselves and push ourselves in those kind of like positive ways.
All right. There you have it, folks. Episode 268? 8, yes. I mean, Jesus. Yeah, in the past 7-8 days, this is the 10th episode I'm recording, and I haven't edited any of the previous ones.
Oh, God. Okay.
And I have 2 episodes tomorrow, and I have 2 episodes the day after that. Yeah,
so this will be out in like 3 months?
No, not don't worry about that. Cool. By the end of March.
Cool.
Yeah, and by the end of March, or probably the first week of April. That's a worst case scenario. By the end of the first week of April.
Cool.
And right, by the way, for anyone who's wondering, we recorded this episode at 7th of March. By my Istanbul time, it's 10:28 p.m. What's your time over there?
7:30.
Wow.
Well,
so
7:28. I'm just no, it's in the evening, PM.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was getting kind of guilty. I was like, oh my God, he probably wants to quickly go. It's late. But I realized, I forgot our times are different. My brain is not braining right now.
Yeah, I'm just going to go have some dinner now.
That's awesome,
go cook something for myself.
Nice. And again, thank you so much for taking your time out of your schedule and coming on for this episode. I really appreciate it. And thank you to anyone who tuned in and listened. As always, if there's any comments, suggestions, or critiques, put them down in the comment section down below, anywhere you're listening or watching. And by the way, where can people contact you if they had any questions? Is their Instagram account okay?
Instagram's probably best. You can email me, but that might get lost between a bunch of other emails. I will always try my best to reply. I am unfortunately fairly busy these days, but I will eventually get back to you, probably. There's pretty high chance I'll get back to you. So if anybody who does listen has any questions about like their professional career, I'll try my best to respond.
All right, awesome. There you have it, folks. As always, take care, stay safe, and until the next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.